For spiritual achievement, the easiest path is to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and to serve him with heart and soul. That is the secret of success. As started by Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura in his 8 stanzas of prayer to the spiritual master, Yasya prasadad bhagavat prasada, by serving or receiving the grace of the spiritual master, one receives the grace of the Supreme Lord. By serving her devotee husband, Kardama Muni, Devahuti shared in his achievements. Similarly, a sincere disciple, simply by serving a bona fide spiritual master, can achieve all the mercy of the Lord and the spiritual master simultaneously. Text 8. Kardama Muni continued, "What is the use of enjoyments other than the Lord's grace? All material achievements are subject to be annihilated simply by a movement of the eyebrows of Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By your principles of devotion to your husband, you have achieved and can enjoy transcendental gifts very rarely obtained by persons proud of aristocracy and material possessions." Purport. Lord Chaitanya recommended that the greatest achievement of human life is to achieve the grace of the Lord, love of God. He said, Prema Pamartho Mahan, to achieve love of Godhead is the highest perfection of life. The same perfection is recommended by Kardama Muni to his wife. His wife belonged to a very aristocratic royal family. Generally, those who are very materialistic or who possess material wealth and prosperity are unable to appreciate the value of transcendental love of God. Although Devahuti was a princess coming from a very great royal family, fortunately she was under the supervision of her great husband, Kardama Muni, who offered her the best gift which can be bestowed in human life, the grace of the Lord, or love of God. This grace of the Lord was achieved by Devahuti by the goodwill and satisfaction of her husband. She served her husband, who was a great devotee and saintly person, with great sincerity, love, affection, and service, and Kardama Muni was satisfied. He willingly gave love of God, and he recommended that she accept it and enjoy it because he had already achieved it. Love of God is not an ordinary commodity. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was worshipped by Rupa Goswami because he distributed love of God, Krishna Prema, to everyone. Rupa Goswami praised him as Mahavadanya, a greatly munificent personality, because he was freely distributing to everyone love of Godhead, which is achieved by wise men only after many, many births. Krishna Prema, Krishna consciousness, is the highest gift which can be bestowed on anyone whom we presume to love. One word used in this verse, Nijadharma Dohan, is very significant. Devahuti, as the wife of Kardama Muni, achieved an invaluable gift from her husband because she was very faithful to him. For a woman, the first principle of religion is to be faithful to her husband. If, fortunately, the husband is a great personality, then the combination is perfect, and the lives of both the wife and the husband are at once fulfilled. Text 9. Upon hearing the speaking of her husband, who excelled in knowledge of all kinds of transcendental science, innocent Devahuti was very satisfied. Her smiling face shining with a slightly bashful glance, she spoke in a choked voice because of great humility and love. Purport. It is said that if one is already engaged in Krishna consciousness and is rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord, then it can be supposed that he has finished all the recommended courses of austerity, penance, religion, sacrifice, mystic yoga, and meditation. Devahuti's husband was so expert in the transcendental science that there was nothing for him to argue about, and when she heard him speak, she was confident that since he was very much advanced in devotional service, he had already surpassed all transcendental educational activities. She had no doubt about the gifts offered by her husband. She knew that he was expert in offering such gifts, and when she understood that he was offering the greatest gift, she was very satisfied. She was overwhelmed with ecstatic love, and therefore she could not reply. Then with faltering language, just like an attractive wife, she spoke the following words. Text 10. Sri Devahuti said, "My dear husband, O best of Brahmanas, I know that you have achieved perfection and are the master of all the infallible mystic powers because you are under the protection of Yogamaya, the transcendental nature. But you once made a promise that our bodily union should now fulfill, since children are a great quality for a chaste woman who has a glorious husband." Purport. Devahuti expressed her happiness by uttering the word bhata, for she knew that her husband was in a highly elevated, transcendental position and was under the shelter of Yogamaya. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, those who are great souls, Mahatmas, are not under the control of the material energy. The Supreme Lord has two energies, material and spiritual. The living entities are marginal energy. As marginal energy, a person may be under the control of the material energy or the spiritual energy, Yogamaya. Kardama Muni was a great soul, and therefore he was under the spiritual energy, which means that he was directly connected with the Supreme Lord. The symptom of this is Krishna consciousness, constant engagement in devotional service. This was known to Devahuti, yet she was anxious to have a son by bodily union with the sage. She reminded her husband of his promise to her parents, "I will remain only until the time of Devahuti's pregnancy." She reminded him that for a chaste woman to have a child by a great personality is most glorious. She wanted to be pregnant, and she prayed for that. The word stri means expansion. By bodily union of the husband and wife, their qualities are expanded. Children born of good parents are expansions of the parents' personal qualifications. Both Kardama Muni and Devahuti were spiritually enlightened. Therefore she desired from the beginning that first she be pregnant, and then she be empowered with the achievement of God's grace and love of God. For a woman, it is a great ambition to have a son of the same quality as a highly qualified husband. Since she had the opportunity to have Kardama Muni as her husband, she also desired to have a child by bodily union. Text 11. My dear Lord, I am struck by excited emotion for you. Therefore kindly make what arrangements must be made according to the scriptures, so that my skinny body, emaciated through unsatisfied passion, may be rendered fit for you. Also, my Lord, please think of a suitable house for this purpose. Purport. The Vedic literatures are not only full of spiritual instruction, but are also instructive in how to prosecute material existence very nicely, with the ultimate aim of spiritual perfection. Devahuti asked her husband, therefore, how to prepare herself for sex life according to the Vedic instructions. Sex life is especially meant for having good children. The circumstances for creating good children are mentioned in Kamashastra, the scripture in which suitable arrangements are prescribed for factually glorious sex life. Everything needed is mentioned in the scriptures: what sort of house and decorations there should be, what sort of dress the wife should have, how she should be decorated with ointments, scents, and other attractive features, etc. With these requisites fulfilled, the husband will be attracted by her beauty, and a favorable mental situation will be created. The mental situation at the time of sex life may then be transferred into the womb of the wife, and good children can come out of that pregnancy. Here is a special reference to Devahuti's bodily features. Because she had become skinny, she feared that her body might have no attraction for Kardama. She wanted to be instructed how to improve her bodily condition in order to attract her husband. Sexual intercourse in which the husband is attracted to the wife is sure to produce a male child, but sexual intercourse based on attraction of the wife for the husband may produce a girl. That is mentioned in the Ayurveda. When the passion of the woman is greater, there is a chance of a girl's being born. When the passion of the man is greater, then there is the possibility of a son. Devahuti wanted the passion of her husband to be increased by the arrangement mentioned in the Kamashastra. She wanted him to instruct her in that way, and she also requested that he arrange for a suitable house, because the hermitage in which Kardama Muni was living was very simple and completely in the mode of goodness, and there was less possibility of passions being aroused in his heart. Text 12. Maitreya continued, O Vidura, seeking to please his beloved wife, the sage Kardama exercised his yogic power and instantly produced an aerial mansion that could travel at his will. Purport. Here the words yogam astita are significant. The sage Kardama was completely perfect in yoga. As the result of real yoga practice, there are 8 kinds of perfection. The yogi can become smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest, or lighter than the lightest. He can achieve anything he likes. He can create even a planet. He can establish influence over anyone, etc. In this way, yogic perfection is achieved, and after this one can achieve the perfection of spiritual life. Thus it was not very wonderful for Kardama Muni to create a mansion in the air, according to his own desire, to fulfill the desire of his beloved wife. He at once created the palace, which is described in the following verses. Text 13. It was a wonderful structure, bedecked with all sorts of jewels, adorned with pillars of precious stones, and capable of yielding whatever one desired. It was equipped with every form of furniture and wealth, which tended to increase in the course of time. Purport: the castle created in the sky by Kardama Muni may be called a castle in the air, but by his mystic power of yoga, Kardama Muni actually constructed a huge castle in the air. To our feeble imagination, a castle in the sky is an impossibility, but if we scrutinizingly consider the matter, we can understand that it is not impossible at all. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead can create so many planets, carrying millions of castles in the air, a perfect yogi like Kardama Muni can easily construct one castle in the air. The castle is described as Shavakamadukam, yielding whatever one desired. It was full of jewels. Even the pillars were made of pearls and valuable stones. These valuable jewels and stones were not subject to deterioration, but were everlastingly and increasingly opulent. We sometimes hear of castles thus bedecked on the surface of this earth also. The castles constructed by Lord Krishna for his 16,108 wives were so bedecked with jewels that there was no need of lamplight during the night. Text 14 through 15. The castle was fully equipped with all necessary paraphernalia, and it was pleasing in all seasons. It was decorated all around with flags, festoons, and artistic work of variegated colors. It was further embellished with wreaths of charming flowers that attracted sweetly humming bees, and with tapestries of linen, silk, and various other fabrics. Text 16. The palace looked charming, with beds, couches, fans, all separately arranged in 7 stories. Purport: it is understood from this verse that the castle had many stories. The words upari upari vinyasta indicate that skyscrapers are not newly invented. Even in those days, millions of years ago, the idea of building many-storied houses was current. They contained not merely 1 or 2 rooms, but many different apartments, and each was completely decorated with cushions, bedsteads, sitting places, and carpets. Text 17. Its beauty was enhanced by artistic engravings here and there on the walls. The floor was of emerald, with coral daces. Purport: at the present moment, people are very proud of their architectural art, yet floors are generally decorated with colored cement. It appears, however, that the castle constructed by the yogic powers of Kardama Muni had floors of emerald with coral daces. Text 18. The palace was very beautiful, with its coral thresholds at the entrances and its doors bedecked with diamonds. Gold pinnacles crowned its domes of sapphire. Text 19. With the choicest rubies set in its diamond walls, it appeared as though possessed of eyes. It was furnished with wonderful canopies and greatly valuable gates of gold. Purport: artistic jewelry and decorations giving the appearance of eyes are not imaginary. Even in recent times, the Mughal emperors constructed their palaces with decorations of jeweled birds, with eyes made of valuable stones. The stones have been taken away by the authorities, but the decorations are still present in some of the castles constructed by the Mughal emperors in New Delhi. The royal palaces were built with jewels and rare stones resembling eyes, and thus at night they would give off reflective light without need of lamps. Text 20. Here and there in that palace were multitudes of live swans and pigeons, as well as artificial swans and pigeons, so lifelike that the real swans rose above them again and again, thinking them live birds like themselves. Thus the palace vibrated with the sounds of these birds. Text 21. The castle had pleasure grounds, resting chambers, bedrooms, and inner and outer yards designed with an eye to comfort. All this caused astonishment to the sage himself. Purport: Kardama Muni, being a saintly person, was living in a humble hermitage, but when he saw the palace constructed by his yogic powers, which was full of resting rooms, rooms for sex enjoyment, and inner and outer yards, he himself was astonished. That is the way of a God-gifted person. A devotee like Kardama Muni exhibited such opulence by his yogic power at the request of his wife, but when the opulence was produced, he himself could not understand how such manifestations could be possible. When a yogi's power is exhibited, the yogi himself is sometimes astonished. Text 22. When he saw Devahuti looking at the gigantic opulent palace with a displeased heart, Kardama Muni could understand her feelings because he could study the heart of anyone. Thus he personally addressed his wife as follows. Purport. Devahuti had spent a long time in the hermitage, not taking much care of her body. She was covered with dirt, and her clothing was not very nice. Kardama Muni was surprised that he could produce such a palace, and similarly his wife, Devahuti, was also astonished. How could she live in that opulent palace? Kardama Muni could understand her astonishment, and thus he spoke as follows. Text 23. My dear Devahuti, you look very much afraid. First bathe in Lake Bindu Saravara, created by Lord Vishnu himself, which can grant all the desires of a human being, and then mount this airplane. Purport. It is still the system to go to places of pilgrimage and take a bath in the water there. In Vrindavana, the people take baths in the river Yamuna. In other places, such as Prayaga, they take baths in the river Ganges. The words Tirtham Asisam Yapakam refer to the fulfillment of desires by bathing in a place of pilgrimage. Kardama Muni advised his good wife to bathe in Lake Bindu Saravara so that she could revive the former beauty and luster of her body. Text 24. The lotus-eyed Devahuti accepted the order of her husband. Because of her dirty dress and the locks of matted hair on her head, she did not look very attractive. Purport. It appears that Devahuti's hair had remained uncombed for many years and had become complicated in tangles. In other words, she neglected her bodily dress and comforts to engage in the service of her husband. Text 25. Her body was coated with a thick layer of dirt, and her breasts were discolored. She dove, however, into the lake, which contained the sacred waters of the Sarasvati. Text 26. In a house inside the lake she saw 1,000 girls, all in the prime of youth, and fragrant like lotuses. Text 27. Seeing her, the damsel suddenly rose and said with folded hands, "We are your maidservants. Tell us what we can do for you." Purport. While Devahuti was thinking of what to do in that great palace in her dirty clothes, there were at once, by the yogic powers of Kardama Muni, 1,000 maidservants prepared to serve her. They appeared before Devahuti within the water, and presented themselves as her maidservants, simply awaiting her orders. Text 28. The girls, being very respectful to Devahuti, brought her forth, and after bathing her with valuable oils and ointments, they gave her fine, new, spotless cloth to cover her body. Text 29. They then decorated her with very excellent and valuable jewels, which shone brightly. Next they offered her food containing all good qualities, and a sweet inebriating drink called asavam. Purport. Asavam is an Ayurvedic medical preparation. It is not a liquor. It is especially made from drugs and is meant to improve metabolism for the healthy condition of the body. Text 30. Then in a mirror she beheld her own reflection. Her body was completely freed from all dirt, and she was adorned with a garland. Dressed in unsullied robes and decorated with auspicious marks of tilaka, she was served very respectfully by the maids. Text 31. Her entire body, including her head, was completely bathed, and she was decorated all over with ornaments. She wore a special necklace with a locket. There were bangles on her wrists and tinkling anklets of gold about her ankles. Purport. The word Kirtasirha Snanam appears here. According to the Smriti Shastra's directions for daily duties, ladies are allowed to bathe daily up to the neck. The hair on the head does not necessarily have to be washed daily, because the mass of wet hair may cause a cold. For ladies, therefore, taking a bath up to the neck is ordinarily prescribed, and they take a full bath only on certain occasions. On this occasion, Devahuti took a full bath and washed her hair very nicely. When a lady takes an ordinary bath, it is called Malasnana, and when she takes a full bath, including the head, it is called Sirasnana. At this time, she needs sufficient oil to smear on her head. That is the direction of the commentators of Smriti Shastra. Text 32. About her hips she wore a girdle of gold, set with numerous jewels, and she was further adorned with a precious pearl necklace and auspicious substances. Purport. Auspicious substances include saffron, kunkuma, and sandalwood pulp. Before taking a bath, there are other auspicious substances, such as turmeric mixed with mustard seed oil, which are smeared all over the body. All kinds of auspicious substances were used to bathe Devahuti from top to toe. Text 33. Her countenance shone with beautiful teeth and charming eyebrows. Her eyes, distinguished by lovely moist corners, defeated the beauty of lotus buds. Her face was surrounded by dark curling tresses. Purport. According to Vedic culture, white teeth are very much appreciated. Devahuti's white teeth increased the beauty of her face and made it look like a lotus flower. When a face looks very attractive, the eyes are generally compared to lotus petals and the face to a lotus flower. Text 34. When she thought of her great husband, the best of the sages, Kardama Muni, who was very dear to her, she, along with all the maidservants, at once appeared where he was. Purport. It appears from this verse that in the beginning Devahuti thought herself to be dirty and dressed in a very niggardly way. When her husband asked her to enter the lake, she saw the maidservants, and they took care of her. Everything was done within the water, and as soon as she thought of her beloved husband Kardama, she was brought before him without delay. These are some of the powers attained by perfect yogis. They can immediately execute anything they desire. Text 35. She was amazed to find herself surrounded by 1,000 maids in the presence of her husband and to witness his yogic power. Purport. Devahuti saw everything miraculously done, yet when brought before her husband, she could understand that it was all due to his great yogic mystic power. She understood that nothing was impossible for a yogi like Kardama Muni. Text 36 to 37. The sage could see that Devahuti had washed herself clean and was shining forth as though no longer his former wife. She had regained her own original beauty as the daughter of a prince. Dressed in excellent robes, her charming breasts duly girded, she was waited upon by 1,000 Gandharva girls. O destroyer of the enemy, his fondness for her grew, and he placed her on the aerial mansion. Purport. Before her marriage, when Devahuti was brought by her parents before the sage Kardama, she was the perfectly beautiful princess, and Kardama Muni remembered her former beauty. But after her marriage, when she was engaged in the service of Kardama Muni, she neglected to care for her body like a princess, since there was no means for such care. Her husband was living in a cottage, and since she was always engaged in serving him, her royal beauty disappeared, and she became just like an ordinary maidservant. Now, after being bathed by the Gandharva girls by the order of Kardama Muni's yogic power, she regained her beauty, and Kardama Muni felt attracted to the beauty she had shown before the marriage. The real beauty of a young woman is her breasts. When Kardama Muni saw the breasts of his wife so nicely decorated, increasing her beauty many times, he was attracted, even though he was a great sage. Srimad Shankaracharya has therefore warned the transcendentalist that one who is after transcendental realization should not be attracted by the raised breasts of a woman, because they are nothing but an interaction of fat and blood within the body. Text 38. Though seemingly attached to his beloved consort while served by the Gandharva girls, the sage did not lose his glory, which was mastery over his self. In the aerial mansion, Kardama Muni, with his consort, shone as charmingly as the moon in the midst of the stars in the sky, which causes rows of lilies to open in ponds at night. Purport. The mansion was in the sky, and therefore the comparison to the full moon and stars is very beautifully composed in this verse. Kardama Muni looked like the full moon, and the girls who surrounded his wife Devahuti seemed just like the stars. On a full moon night, the stars and the moon together form a beautiful constellation. Similarly, in that aerial mansion in the sky, Kardama Muni with his beautiful wife and the damsels surrounding them appeared like the moon and stars on a full moon night. Text 39. In that aerial mansion, he traveled to the pleasure valleys of Mount Meru, which were rendered all the more beautiful by cool, gentle, fragrant breezes that stimulated passion. In these valleys, the treasurer of the gods, Kuvera, surrounded by beautiful women and praised by the Siddhas, generally enjoys pleasure. Kardama Muni also, surrounded by the beautiful damsels and his wife, went there and enjoyed for many, many years. Purport. Kuvera is one of the 8 demigods who are in charge of different directions of the universe. It is said that Indra is in charge of the eastern side of the universe, where the heavenly planet or paradise is situated. Similarly, Agni is in charge of the southeastern portion of the universe. Yama, the demigod who punishes sinners, is in charge of the southern portion. Nirti is in charge of the southwestern part of the universe. Varuna, the demigod in charge of the waters, is in charge of the western portion. Vayu, who controls the air and who has wings to travel in the air, is in charge of the northwestern part of the universe, and Kuvera, the treasurer of the demigods, is in charge of the northern part of the universe. All these demigods take pleasure in the valleys of Mount Meru, which is situated somewhere between the sun and the earth. In the aerial mansion, Kardama Muni traveled throughout the 8 directions, controlled by the different demigods described above, and as the demigods go to Mount Meru, he also went there to enjoy life. When one is surrounded by young beautiful girls, sex stimulation naturally becomes prominent. Kardama Muni was sexually stimulated, and he enjoyed his wife for many, many years in that part of Mount Meru. But his sex indulgence was praised by many, many siddhas, beings who have attained perfection, because it was intended to produce good progeny for the good of universal affairs. Text 40. Satisfied by his wife, he enjoyed in that aerial mansion not only on Mount Meru, but in different gardens known as Vaishrampaka, Surashana, Nandana, Puspabhadraka, and Chaitraratya, and by the Manasya Sarovara lake. Text 41. He traveled in that way through the various planets, as the air passes uncontrolled in every direction. Coursing through the air in that great and splendid aerial mansion, which could fly at his will, he surpassed even the demigods. Purport. The planets occupied by the demigods are restricted to their own orbits, but Kardama Muni, by his yogic power, could travel all over the different directions of the universe without restriction. The living entities who are within the universe are called conditioned souls, that is, they are not free to move everywhere. We are inhabitants of this earthly globe. We cannot move freely to other planets. In the modern age, man is trying to go to other planets, but so far he has been unsuccessful. It is not possible to travel to any other planets, because by the laws of nature, even the demigods cannot move from one planet to another. But Kardama Muni, by his yogic power, could surpass the strength of the demigods and travel in space in all directions. The comparison here is very suitable. The words yatha annila indicate that as the air is free to move anywhere without restriction, so Kardama Muni unrestrictedly traveled in all directions of the universe. Text 42. What is difficult to achieve for determined men who have taken refuge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's lotus feet? His feet are the source of sacred rivers like the Ganges, which put an end to the dangers of mundane life. Purport. The words Yair Asritas Tirtha Padas Charana are significant here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Tirtha Pada. The Ganges is called a sacred river because it emanates from the toe of Vishnu. The Ganges is meant to eradicate all the material distresses of the conditioned souls. For any living entity, therefore, who has taken shelter of the holy lotus feet of the Lord, nothing is impossible. Kardama Muni is special not because he was a great mystic, but because he was a great devotee. Therefore it is said here that for a great devotee like Kardama Muni, nothing is impossible. Although yogis can perform wonderful feats, as Kardama has already displayed, Kardama was more than a yogi because he was a great devotee of the Lord. Therefore he was more glorious than an ordinary yogi. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, out of the many yogis, he who is a devotee of the Lord is first class. For a person like Kardama Muni, there is no question of being conditioned. He was already a liberated soul, and better than the demigods, who are also conditioned. Although he was enjoying with his wife and many other women, he was above material conditional life. Therefore the word Vyasanatyaya is used to indicate that he was beyond the position of a conditioned soul. He was transcendental to all material limitations. Text 43. After showing his wife the globe of the universe and its different arrangements, full of many wonders, the great yogi Kardama Muni returned to his own hermitage. Purport. All the planets are here described as Gola, round. Every planet is round, and each planet is a different shelter, just like islands in the great ocean. Planets are sometimes called Dvipa or Varsha. The Earth planet is called Bharatavarsha because it was ruled by King Bharata. Another significant word used in this verse is Bhavascharya, many wonderful things. This indicates that the different planets are distributed all over the universe in the 8 directions, and each and every one of them is wonderful in itself. Each planet has its particular climatic influences and particular types of inhabitants, and is completely equipped with everything, including the beauty of the seasons. In the Brahma Samhita 540, it is similarly stated, Vibhuti Binam. On each and every planet there are different opulences. It cannot be expected that one planet is exactly like another. By God's grace, by nature's law, each and every planet is made differently and has different wonderful features. All such wonders were personally experienced by Kardama Muni while he traveled with his wife. Yet he could return again to his humble hermitage. He showed his princess wife that although he was living in the hermitage, he had the power to go everywhere and do anything by mystic yoga. That is the perfection of yoga. One cannot become a perfect yogi simply by showing some sitting postures, nor by such sitting postures or so-called meditation can one become God, as is being advertised. Foolish persons are misled into believing that simply by some caricature of meditation and sitting postures one can become God within 6 months. Here is the example of a perfect yogi. He could travel all over the universe. Similarly, there is a description of Durvasha Muni, who also traveled in space. Actually, the perfect yogi can do that. But even if one can travel all over the universe and show wonderful feats like Kardama Muni, he cannot be compared to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose power and inconceivable energy can never be attained by any conditioned or liberated soul. By the actions of Kardama Muni, we can understand that in spite of his immense mystic power, he remained a devotee of the Lord. That is the real position of every living entity. Text 44. After coming back to his hermitage, he divided himself into 9 personalities just to give pleasure to Devahuti, the daughter of Manu, who was eager for sex life. In that way, he enjoyed with her for many, many years, which passed just like a moment. Purport. Here the daughter of Svayambhava Manu, Devahuti, is described as Suratotshuka. After traveling with her husband all over the universe in Mount Meru and the beautiful gardens of the heavenly kingdoms, she naturally became sexually stimulated, and in order to satisfy her sexual desire, Kardama Muni expanded himself into 9 forms. Instead of 1, he became 9, and 9 persons had sexual intercourse with Devahuti for many, many years. It is understood that the sexual appetite of a woman is 9 times greater than that of a man. That is clearly indicated here. Otherwise, Kardama Muni would have had no reason to expand himself into 9. Here is another example of yogic power. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead can expand himself in millions of forms, a yogi can also expand up to 9 forms, but not more than that. Another example is that of Saubhari Muni. He also expanded himself into 8 forms, but however powerful a yogi may be, he cannot expand himself into more than 8 or 9 forms. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, can expand himself into millions of forms, Ananta Rupa, innumerable countless forms. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, no one can compare to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by any conceivable energetic manifestation of power. Text 45. In that aerial mansion, Devahuti, in the company of her handsome husband, situated on an excellent bed that increased sexual desires, could not realize how much time was passing. Purport. Sex indulgence is so enjoyable for materialistic people that when they engage in such activities, they forget how time is passing. Saint Kardama and Devahuti, in their sex indulgence, also forgot how time was passing by. Text 46. While the couple, who eagerly longed for sexual pleasure, were thus enjoying themselves by virtue of mystic powers, 100 autumns passed like a brief span of time. Text 47. The powerful Kardama Muni was the knower of everyone's heart, and he could grant whatever one desired. Knowing the spiritual soul, he regarded her as half of his body. Dividing himself into 9 forms, he impregnated Devahuti with 9 discharges of semen. Purport. Since Kardama Muni could understand that Devahuti wanted many children, at the first chance he begot 9 children at one time. He is described here as Vibhu, the most powerful master. By his yogic power, he could at once produce 9 daughters in the womb of Devahuti. Text 48. Immediately afterward, on the same day, Devahuti gave birth to 9 female children, all charming in every limb and fragrant with the scent of the red lotus flower. Purport. Devahuti was too sexually excited, and therefore she discharged more ova, and 9 daughters were born. It is said in the Smriti Shastra, as well as in the Ayurveda, that when the discharge of the male is greater, male children are begotten, but when the discharge of the female is greater, female children are begotten. It appears from the circumstances that Devahuti was more sexually excited, and therefore she had 9 daughters at once. All the daughters, however, were very beautiful, and their bodies were nicely formed. Each resembled a lotus flower and was fragrant like a lotus. Text 49. When she saw her husband about to leave home, she smiled externally, but at heart she was agitated and distressed. Purport. Kardama Muni finished his household affairs quickly by his mystic power, the building of the castle in the air, traveling all over the universe with his wife, in the company of beautiful girls, and begetting of children were finished, and now, according to his promise to leave home for his real concern of spiritual realization, after impregnating his wife, he was about to go away. Seeing her husband about to leave, Devahuti was very disturbed, but to satisfy her husband she was smiling. The example of Kardama Muni should be understood very clearly. A person whose main concern is Krishna consciousness, even if he is entrapped in household life, should always be ready to leave household enticement as soon as possible. Text 50. She stood and scratched the ground with her foot, which was radiant with the luster of her gem-like nails. Her head bent down. She spoke in slow yet charming accents, suppressing her tears. Purport. Devahuti was so beautiful that her toenails appeared just like pearls, and as she scratched the ground it appeared as if pearls had been thrown on the ground. When a woman scratches the ground with her foot, it is a sign that her mind is very disturbed. These signs were sometimes exhibited by the gopis before Krishna. When the gopis came in the dead of night and Krishna asked them to return to their homes, the gopis also scratched the ground like this because their minds were very disturbed. Text 51. Sri Devahuti said, "My Lord, you have fulfilled all the promises you gave me, yet because I am your surrendered soul, you should give me fearlessness too." Purport. Devahuti requested her husband to grant her something without fear. As a wife, she was a fully surrendered soul to her husband, and it is the responsibility of the husband to give his wife fearlessness. How one awards fearlessness to his subordinate is mentioned in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. One who cannot get free from the clutches of death is dependent, and he should not become a spiritual master, nor a husband, nor a kinsman, nor a father, nor a mother, etc. It is the duty of the superior to give fearlessness to the subordinate. To take charge of someone, therefore, either as father, mother, spiritual master, relative, or husband, one must accept the responsibility to give his ward freedom from the fearful situation of material existence. Material existence is always fearful and full of anxiety. Devahuti is saying, "You have given me all sorts of material comforts by your yogic power, and since you are now prepared to go away, you must give me your last award so that I may get free from this material conditional life." Text 52. My dear Brahmana, as far as your daughters are concerned, they will find their own suitable husbands and go away to their respective homes. But who will give me solace after your departure as a sannyasi? Purport. It is said that the father himself becomes the son in another form. The father and son are therefore considered to be non-different. A widow who has her son is actually not a widow, because she has the representative of her husband. Similarly, Devahuti is indirectly asking Kardama Muni to leave a representative, so that in his absence she might be relieved of her anxieties by a suitable son. A householder is not expected to remain at home for all his days. After getting his sons and daughters married, a householder can retire from household life, leaving his wife in the charge of the grown-up sons. That is the social convention of the Vedic system. Devahuti is indirectly asking that in his absence from home, there be at least one male child to give her relief from her anxieties. His relief means spiritual instruction. Relief does not mean material comforts. Material comforts will end with the end of the body. But spiritual instruction will not end. It will go on with the spirit soul. Instruction in spiritual advancement is necessary, but without having a worthy son, how could Devahuti advance in spiritual knowledge? It is the duty of the husband to liquidate his debt to his wife. The wife gives her sincere service to the husband, and he becomes indebted to her because one cannot accept service from his subordinate without giving him something in exchange. The spiritual master cannot accept service from a disciple without awarding him spiritual instruction. That is the reciprocation of love and duty. Thus Devahuti reminds her husband, Kardama Muni, that she has rendered him faithful service, even considering the situation on the basis of liquidating his debt toward his wife. He must give a male child before he leaves. Indirectly, Devahuti requests her husband to remain at home a few days more, or at least until a male child is born. Text 53. Until now we have simply wasted so much of our time in sense gratification, neglecting to cultivate knowledge of the Supreme Lord. Purport. Human life is not meant to be wasted like that of the animals. In sense gratificatory activities, animals always engage in sense gratification, eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But that is not the engagement of the human being. Although because of the material body there is need of sense gratification, according to a regulative principle, so in effect Devahuti said to her husband, "So far we have these daughters, and we have enjoyed material life in the aerial mansion, traveling all over the universe. These boons have come by your grace, but they have all been for sense gratification. Now there must be something for my spiritual advancement." Text 54. Not knowing your transcendental situation, I have loved you while remaining attached to the objects of the senses. Nonetheless, let the affinity I have developed for you rid me of all fear. Purport. Devahuti is lamenting her position. As a woman she had to love someone. Somehow or other she came to love Kardama Muni, but without knowing of his spiritual advancement. Kardama Muni could understand Devahuti's heart. Generally all women desire material enjoyment. They are called less intelligent because they are mostly prone to material enjoyment. Devahuti laments because her husband had given her the best kind of material enjoyment, but she did not know that he was so advanced in spiritual realization. Her plea was that even though she did not know the glories of her great husband, because she had taken shelter of him, she must be delivered from material entanglement. Association with the great personality is most important. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya says that sadhusanga, the association of a great saintly person, is very important because even if one is not advanced in knowledge, simply by association with a great saintly person, one can immediately make considerable advancement in spiritual life. As a woman, as an ordinary wife, Devahuti became attracted to Kardama Muni in order to satisfy her sense enjoyment and other material necessities, but actually she associated with a great personality. Now she understood this, and she wanted to utilize the advantage of the association of her great husband. Text 55. Association for sense gratification is certainly the path of bondage, but the same type of association, performed with a saintly person, leads to the path of liberation, even if performed without knowledge. Purport. The association of a saintly person in any way bears the same result. For example, Lord Krishna met many kinds of living entities, and some treated him as an enemy, and some treated him as an agent for sense gratification. It is generally said that the gopis were attracted to Krishna for sense attractions, and yet they became first-class devotees of the Lord. Kamsa, Sisupala, Dantavakra, and other demons, however, were related to Krishna as enemies. But whether they associated with Krishna as enemies, or for sense gratification, out of fear, or as pure devotees, they all got liberation. That is the result of association with the Lord. Even if one does not understand who he is, the results have the same efficacy. Association with a great saintly person also results in liberation, just as whether one goes toward fire knowingly or unknowingly, the fire will make one warm. Devahuti expressed her gratefulness, for although she wanted to associate with Kardama Muni only for sense gratification, because he was spiritually great, she was sure to be liberated by his benediction. Text 56. Anyone whose work is not meant to elevate him to religious life, anyone whose religious ritualistic performances do not raise him to renunciation, and anyone situated in renunciation that does not lead him to devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead must be considered dead, although he is breathing. Purport. Devahuti's statement is that since she was attached to living with her husband for sense gratification, which does not lead to liberation from material entanglement, her life was simply a waste of time. Any work one performs that does not lead to the state of religious life is useless activity. Everyone is by nature inclined to some sort of work, and when that work leads one to religious life, and religious life leads one to renunciation, and renunciation leads one to devotional service, one attains the perfection of work. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, any work that does not lead ultimately to the standard of devotional service is a cause of bondage in the material world. Yajnatat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. Unless one is gradually elevated to the position of devotional service, beginning from his natural activity, he is to be considered a dead body. Work which does not lead one to the understanding of Krishna consciousness is considered useless. Text 57. My Lord, surely I have been solidly cheated by the insurmountable illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for in spite of having obtained your association, which gives liberation from material bondage, I did not seek such liberation. Purport. An intelligent man should utilize good opportunities. The first opportunity is the human form of life, and the second opportunity is to take birth in a suitable family where there is cultivation of spiritual knowledge. This is rarely obtained. The greatest opportunity is to have the association of a saintly person. Devahuti was conscious that she was born as the daughter of an emperor. She was sufficiently educated and cultured, and at last she got Kardama Muni, a saintly person, and a great yogi as her husband. Still, if she did not get liberation from the entanglement of material energy, then certainly she would be cheated by the insurmountable illusory energy. Actually, the illusory material energy is cheating everyone. People do not know what they are doing when they worship the material energy in the form of Goddess Kali or Durga for material boons. They ask, Mother, give me great riches, give me a good wife, give me fame, give me victory. But such devotees of the goddess Maya or Durga do not know that they are being cheated by that goddess. Material achievement is actually no achievement, because as soon as one is illusioned by the material gifts, he becomes more and more entangled, and there is no question of liberation. One should be intelligent enough to know how to utilize material assets for the purpose of spiritual realization. That is called karma yoga or jnana yoga. Whatever we have, we should use as service to the Supreme Person. It is advised in Bhagavad Gita, Svakarmanatam avyarchya. One should try to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead by one's assets. There are many forms of service to the Supreme Lord, and anyone can render service unto him according to the best of his ability. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 3rd Canto, 23rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Devahuti's Lamentation. Chapter 24. Renunciation of Kardama Muni. Text 1. Recalling the words of Lord Vishnu, the merciful sage Kardama replied as follows to Svayambhava Manu's praiseworthy daughter, Devahuti, who was speaking words full of renunciation. Text 2. The sage said, Do not be disappointed with yourself, O princess. You are actually praiseworthy. The infallible Supreme Personality of Godhead will shortly enter your womb as your son. Purport. Kardama Muni encouraged his wife not to be sorry, thinking herself unfortunate because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his incarnation, was going to come from her body. Text 3. You have undertaken sacred vows. God will bless you. Hence you should worship the Lord with great faith, through sensory control, religious observances, austerities, and gifts of your money and charity. Purport. In order to spiritually advance or to achieve the mercy of the Lord, one must be self-controlled in the following manner. He must be restrained in sense gratification and must follow the rules and regulations of religious principles. Without austerity and penance, and without sacrificing one's riches, one cannot achieve the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Kardama Muni advised his wife, You have to factually engage in devotional service with austerity and penance, following the religious principles and giving loving charity. Then the Supreme Lord will be pleased with you, and he will come as your son. Text 4. The personality of Godhead being worshipped by you will spread my name and fame. He will vanquish the knot of your heart by becoming your son and teaching knowledge of Brahman. Purport. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes to disseminate spiritual knowledge for the benefit of all people, he generally descends as the son of a devotee, being pleased by the devotee's devotional service. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the father of everyone. No one, therefore, is his father. By his inconceivable energy, he accepts some of the devotees as his parents and descendants. It is explained here that spiritual knowledge vanquishes the knot of the heart. Matter and spirit are knotted by false ego. This identification of oneself with matter, which is called Hirdaya Granthi, exists for all conditioned souls, and it becomes more and more tightened when there is too much affection for sex life. The explanation was given by Lord Rishabha to his sons that this material world is an atmosphere of attraction between male and female. That attraction takes the shape of a knot in the heart, and by material affection it becomes still more tight. For people who hanker after material possessions, society, friendship, and love, this knot of affection becomes very strong. It is only by Brahma Bhavana, the instruction by which spiritual knowledge is enhanced, that the knot in the heart is cut to pieces. No material weapon is needed to cut this knot, but it requires bona fide spiritual instruction. Kardama Muni instructed his wife Devahuti that the Lord would appear as her son and disseminate spiritual knowledge to cut the knot of material identification. Text 5. Sri Maitreya said, Devahuti was fully faithful and respectful toward the direction of her husband, Kardama, who was one of the Prajapatis, or generators of human beings in the universe. O great sage, she thus began to worship the Master of the universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart. Purport. This is the process of spiritual realization. One has to receive instruction from a bona fide spiritual master. Kardama Muni was Devahuti's husband, but because he instructed her on how to achieve spiritual perfection, he naturally became her spiritual master also. There are many instances wherein the husband becomes the spiritual master. Lord Shiva also is the spiritual master of his consort Parvati. A husband should be so enlightened that he should become the spiritual master of his wife in order to enlighten her in the advancement of Krishna consciousness. Generally, Sitri, or woman, is less intelligent than man. Therefore, if the husband is intelligent enough, the woman gets a great opportunity for spiritual enlightenment. Here it is clearly said, Samyak Shraddhaya, that with great faith one should receive knowledge from the spiritual master, and with great faith execute the performance of service. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura, in his commentary on Bhagavad Gita, has especially stressed the instruction of the spiritual master. One should accept the instruction of the spiritual master as one's life and soul. Whether one is liberated or not liberated, one should execute the instruction of the spiritual master with great faith. It is also stated that the Lord is situated in everyone's heart. One does not have to seek the Lord outside. He is already there. One simply has to concentrate on one's worship in good faith, as instructed by the bona fide spiritual master, and one's efforts will come out successfully. It is also clear that the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not appear as an ordinary child. He appears as he is. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, he appears by his own internal potency, Atmamaya. And how does he appear? He appears when pleased by the worship of a devotee. A devotee may ask the Lord to appear as her son. The Lord is already sitting within the heart, and if he comes out from the body of a devotee, it does not mean that the particular woman becomes his mother in the material sense. He is always there, but in order to please his devotee, he appears as her son. Text 6. After many, many years, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Madhusudana, the killer of the demon Madhu, having entered the semen of Kardama, appeared in Devahuti just as fire comes from wood in a sacrifice. Purport. It is clearly stated here that the Lord is always the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although he appeared as the son of Kardama Muni, fire is already present in wood. but by a certain process fire is kindled. Similarly, God is all-pervading. He is everywhere, and since he may come out from everything, he appeared in his devotees' semen, just as an ordinary living entity takes his birth by taking shelter of the semen of a certain living entity. The Supreme Personality of Godhead accepts the shelter of the semen of his devotee and comes out as his son. This manifests his full independence to act in any way, and it does not mean that he is an ordinary living entity forced to take birth in a certain type of womb. Lord Narasimha appeared from the pillar of Hiranyakasipu's palace, Lord Varaha appeared from the nostril of Brahma, and Lord Kapila appeared from the semen of Kardama. But this does not mean that the nostril of Brahma or the pillar of Hiranyakasipu's palace or the semen of Kardama Muni is the source of the appearance of the Lord. The Lord is always the Lord. Bhagavan Madhusudana, he is the killer of all kinds of demons, and he always remains the Lord, even if he appears as the son of a particular devotee. The word Kardamam is significant, for it indicates that the Lord had some devotional affection or relationship in devotional service with Kardama and Devahuti, but we should not mistakenly understand that he was born just like an ordinary living entity from the semen of Kardama Muni in the womb of Devahuti. Text 7. At the time of his descent on earth, demigods in the form of raining clouds sounded musical instruments in the sky. The celestial musicians, the Gandharvas, sang the glories of the Lord, while celestial dancing girls, known as Apsaras, danced in joyful ecstasy. Text 8. At the time of the Lord's appearance, the demigods flying freely in the sky showered flowers. All the directions, all the waters, and everyone's mind became very satisfied. Purport. It is learned herewith that in the higher sky there are living entities who can travel through the air without being hampered. Although we can travel in outer space, we are hampered by so many impediments, but they are not. We learn from the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam that the inhabitants of the planet called Siddhaloka can travel in space from one planet to another without impediment. They showered flowers on the earth when Lord Kapila, the son of Kardama, appeared. Text 9. Brahma, the firstborn living being, went along with Marichi and other sages to the place of Kardama's hermitage, which was surrounded by the river Sarasvati. Purport. Brahma is called Svayambhu because he is not born of any material father and mother. He is the first living creature and is born from the lotus which grows from the abdomen of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Garbhodakasai Vishnu. Therefore he is called Svayambhu, self-born. Text 10. Maitreya continued, O killer of the enemy, the unborn Lord Brahma, who is almost independent in acquiring knowledge, could understand that a portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his quality of pure existence, had appeared in the womb of Devahuti, just to explain the complete state of knowledge known as Sankhya Yoga. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, it is stated that the Lord himself is the compiler of Vedanta Sutra, and he is the perfect knower of Vedanta Sutra. Similarly, the Sankhya philosophy is compiled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his appearance as Kapila. There is an imitation Kapila who has a Sankhya philosophical system, but Kapila, the incarnation of God, is different from that Kapila. Kapila, the son of Kardama Muni, in his system of Sankhya philosophy, very explicitly explained not only the material world, but also the spiritual world. Brahma could understand this fact because he is Svarat, almost independent in receiving knowledge. He is called Svarat because he did not go to any school or college to learn, but learned everything from within. Because Brahma is the first living creature within this universe, he had no teacher. His teacher was the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, who is seated in the heart of every living creature. Brahma acquired knowledge directly from the Supreme Lord within the heart. Therefore he is sometimes called Svarat and Aja. Another important point is stated here. Sattvanamsana. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears, he brings with him all his paraphernalia of Vaikuntha. Therefore his name, his form, his quality, his paraphernalia, and his entourage all belong to the transcendental world. Real goodness is in the transcendental world. Here in the material world, the quality of goodness is not pure. Goodness may exist, but there must also be some tinges of passion and ignorance. In the spiritual world, the unalloyed quality of goodness prevails. There, the quality of goodness is called Suddhasattva, pure goodness. Another name for Suddhasattva is Vasudeva, because God is born from Vasudeva. Another meaning is that when one is purely situated in the qualities of goodness, he can understand the form, name, quality, paraphernalia, and entourage of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The word Amsana also indicates that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, appeared as Kapiladeva in a portion of his portion. God expands either as Kala or as Amsa. Amsa means direct expansion, and Kala means expansion of the expansion. There is no difference between the expansion of the expansion, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly, as there is no difference between one candle and another. But still the candle from which the others are lit is called the original. Krishna, therefore, is called the Parabrahman, or the ultimate Godhead, and cause of all causes. Text 11. After worshipping the Supreme Lord with gladdened senses and a pure heart of his intended activities as an incarnation, Brahma spoke as follows to Kardama and Devahuti. Purport. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter, anyone who understands the transcendental activities, the appearance and the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is to be considered liberated. Brahma, therefore, is a liberated soul. Although he is in charge of this material world, he is not exactly like the common living entity. Since he is liberated from the majority of the follies of the common living entities, he was in knowledge of the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he therefore worshipped the Lord's activities, and with a glad heart he also praised Kardama Muni, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Kapila had appeared as his son. One who can become the father of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is certainly a great devotee. There is a verse spoken by a Brahmana in which he says that he does not know what the Vedas and what the Puranas are, but while others might be interested in the Vedas or Puranas, he is interested in Nanda Maharaja, who appeared as the father of Krishna. The Brahmana wanted to worship Nanda Maharaja because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as a child, crawled in the yard of his house. These are some of the good sentiments of devotees. If a recognized devotee brings forth the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son, how he should be praised. Brahma, therefore, not only worshipped the incarnation of Godhead Kapila, but also praised his so-called father, Kardama Muni. Text 12. Lord Brahma said, "My dear son Kardama, since you have completely accepted my instructions without duplicity, showing them proper respect, you have worshipped me properly. Whatever instructions you took from me, you have carried out, and thereby you have honored me." Purport. Lord Brahma, as the first living entity within the universe, is supposed to be the spiritual master of everyone, and he is also the father, the creator of all beings. Kardama Muni is one of the Prajapatis, or creators of the living entities, and he is also a son of Brahma. Brahma praises Kardama because he carried out the orders of the spiritual master in toto and without cheating. A conditioned soul in the material world has the disqualification of cheating. He has 4 disqualifications. He is sure to commit mistakes, he is sure to be illusioned, he is prone to cheat others, and his senses are imperfect. But if one carries out the order of the spiritual master by disciplic succession, or the parampara system, he overcomes the 4 defects. Therefore, knowledge received from the bona fide spiritual master is not cheating. Any other knowledge which is manufactured by the conditioned soul is cheating only. Brahma knew well that Kardama Muni exactly carried out the instructions received from him, and that he actually honored his spiritual master. To honor the spiritual master means to carry out his instructions word for word. Text 13. Sons ought to render service to their father exactly to this extent. One should obey the command of his father or spiritual master with due deference, saying, "Yes, sir." Purport. 2 words in this verse are very important. One word is pitari, and another word is guru. The son or disciple should accept the words of his spiritual master and father without hesitation. Whatever the father and the spiritual master orders should be taken without argument. Yes, there should be no instance in which the disciple or son says, "This is not correct. I cannot carry it out." When he says that, he is fallen. The father and the spiritual master are on the same platform because the spiritual master is the second father. The higher classes are called dvija, twice born. Whenever there is a question of birth, there must be a father. The first birth is made possible by the actual father, and the second birth is made possible by the spiritual master. Sometimes the father and the spiritual master may be the same man, and sometimes they are different men. In any case, the order of the father or the order of the spiritual master must be carried out without hesitation, with an immediate yes. There should be no argument. That is real service to the father and to the spiritual master. Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura has stated that the order of the spiritual master is the life and soul of the disciples. As a man cannot separate his life from his body, a disciple cannot separate the order of the spiritual master from his life. If a disciple follows the instruction of the spiritual master in that way, he is sure to become perfect. This is confirmed in the Upanishads. The import of Vedic instruction is revealed automatically only to one who has implicit faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and in his spiritual master. One may be materially considered an illiterate man, but if he has faith in the spiritual master as well as in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the meaning of scriptural revelation is immediately manifested before him. Text 14. Lord Brahma then praised Kardama Muni's 9 daughters, saying, "All your thin-waisted daughters are certainly very chaste. I am sure they will increase this creation by their own descendants in various ways." Purport. In the beginning of creation, Brahma was concerned more or less with increasing the population, and when he saw that Kardama Muni had already begotten 9 nice daughters, he was hopeful that through the daughters many children would come who would take charge of the creative principle of the material world. He was therefore happy to see them. The word sumadhyama means a good daughter of a beautiful woman. If she has a thin waist, a woman is considered very beautiful. All the daughters of Kardama Muni were of the same beautiful feature. Text 15. Therefore, today please give away your daughters to the foremost of the sages, with due regard for the girls' temperaments and likings, and thereby spread your fame all over the universe. Purport. The 9 principal rishis or sages are Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Burgu, Vasista, and Atharva. All these rishis are most important, and Brahma desired that the 9 daughters already born of Kardama Muni be handed over to them. Here 2 words are used very significantly, Yathasilam and Yatharuchi. The daughters should be handed over to the respective rishis not blindly, but according to the combination of character and taste. That is, the art of combining a man and woman. Man and woman should not be united simply on the consideration of sex life. There are many other considerations, especially character and taste. If the taste and character differ between the man and woman, their combination will be unhappy. Even about 40 years ago, in Indian marriages, the taste and character of the boy and girl were first of all matched, and then they were allowed to marry. This was done under the direction of the respective parents. The parents used to astrologically determine the character and tastes of the boy and girl, and when they corresponded, the match was selected. This girl and this boy are just suitable, and they should be married. Other considerations were less important. The same system was also advised in the beginning of the creation by Brahma. Your daughters should be handed over to the rishis according to taste and character. According to astrological calculation, a person is classified according to whether he belongs to the godly or demoniac quality. In that way, the spouse was selected. A girl of godly quality should be handed over to a boy of godly quality. A girl of demoniac quality should be handed over to a boy of demoniac quality. Then they will be happy. But if the girl is demoniac and the boy is godly, then the combination is incompatible. They cannot be happy in such a marriage. At the present moment, because boys and girls are not married according to quality and character, most marriages are unhappy, and there is divorce. It is foretold in the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam that in this age of Kali, married life will be considered on the consideration of sex only. When the boy and girl are pleased in sex, they get married, and when there is deficiency in sex, they separate. That is not actual marriage, but a combination of men and women like cats and dogs. Therefore, the children produced in the modern age are not exactly human beings. Human beings must be twice born. A child is first born of a good father and mother, and then he is born again of the spiritual master in the Vedas. The first mother and father bring about his birth into the world, then the spiritual master and the Vedas become his second father and mother. According to the Vedic system of marriage for producing children, every man and woman was enlightened in spiritual knowledge, and at the time of their combination to produce a child, everything was scrutinizingly and scientifically done. Text 16. O Kardama, I know that the original Supreme Personality of Godhead has now appeared as an incarnation by his internal energy. He is the bestower of all desired by the living entities, and he has now assumed the body of Kapila Muni. Purport. In this verse we find the words Purusham Avatirnam Svamayaya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is everlastingly, eternally the form of Purusha, the predominator or enjoyer, and when he appears he never accepts anything of this material energy. The spiritual world is a manifestation of his personal internal potency, whereas the material world is a manifestation of his material or differentiated energy. The word Svamayaya, by his own internal potency, indicates that whenever the Supreme Personality of Godhead descends, he comes in his own energy. He may assume the body of a human being, but that body is not material. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, it is clearly stated that only fools and rascals, buddhas, consider the body of Krishna to be the body of a common human being. The word Sevadim means that he is the original bestower of all the necessities of life upon the living entities. In the Vedas also it is stated that he is the chief living entity, and that he bestows all the desired necessities of other living entities. Because he is the bestower of the necessities of all others, he is called God. The Supreme is also a living entity. He is not impersonal. As we are individual, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also individual, but he is the Supreme Individual. That is the difference between God and the ordinary living entities. Text 17. By mystic yoga and the practical application of knowledge from the scriptures, Kapila Muni, who is characterized by his golden hair, his eyes just like lotus petals, and his lotus feet, which bear the marks of lotus flowers, will uproot the deep-rooted desire for work in this material world. Purport. In this verse, the activities and bodily features of Kapila Muni are very nicely described. The activities of Kapila Muni are forecast herein. He will present the philosophy of Sankhya in such a way that by studying his philosophy, people will be able to uproot the deep-rooted desire for karma, fruit of activities. Everyone in this material world engages in achieving the fruits of his labor. A man tries to be happy by achieving the fruits of his own honest labor, but actually he becomes more and more entangled. One cannot get out of this entanglement unless he has perfect knowledge or devotional service. Those who are trying to get out of the entanglement by speculation are also doing their best, but in the Vedic scriptures we find that if one has taken to the devotional service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness, he can very easily uproot the deep-rooted desire for fruit of activities. Sankhya philosophy will be broadcast by Kapila Muni for that purpose. His bodily features are also described herein. Jnana does not refer to ordinary research work. Jnana entails receiving knowledge from the scriptures through the spiritual master by disciplic succession. In the modern age, there is a tendency to do research by mental speculation and concoction, but the man who speculates forgets that he himself is subject to the 4 defects of nature. He is sure to commit mistakes, his senses are imperfect, he is sure to fall into illusion, and he is cheating. Unless one has perfect knowledge from disciplic succession, he simply puts forth some theories of his own creation. Therefore he is cheating people. Jnana means knowledge received through disciplic succession from the scriptures, and Vijnana means practical application of such knowledge. Kapila Muni's Sankhya system of philosophy is based on Jnana and Vijnana. Text 18. Lord Brahma then told Devahuti, "My dear daughter of Manu, the same Supreme Personality of Godhead who killed the demon Kaitaba is now within your womb. He will cut off all the knots of your ignorance and doubt. Then he will travel all over the world." Purport. Here the word avidya is very significant. Avidya means forgetfulness of one's identity. Every one of us is a spirit soul, but we have forgotten. We think, I am this body. This is called avidya. Samsaya granthi means doubtfulness. The knot of doubtfulness is tied when the soul identifies with the material world. That knot is also called ahankara, the junction of matter and spirit. By proper knowledge received from the scriptures in disciplic succession, and by proper application of that knowledge, one can free himself from this binding combination of matter and spirit. Brahma assures Devahuti that her son will enlighten her, and after enlightening her, he will travel all over the world, distributing the system of Sankhya philosophy. The word samsaya means doubtful knowledge. Speculative and pseudo-yogic knowledge is all doubtful. At the present moment, the so-called yoga system is prosecuted on the understanding that by agitation of the different stations of the bodily construction, one can find that he is God. The mental speculators think similarly, but they are all doubtful. Real knowledge is expounded in Bhagavad Gita. Just become Krishna conscious. Just worship Krishna and become a devotee of Krishna. That is real knowledge, and anyone who follows that system becomes perfect without a doubt. Text 19. Your son will be the head of all the perfected souls. He will be approved by the acharyas, expert in disseminating real knowledge, and among the people he will be celebrated by the name Kapila. As the son of Devahuti, he will increase your fame. Purport. Sankhya philosophy is the philosophical system enunciated by Kapila, the son of Devahuti. The other Kapila, who is not the son of Devahuti, is an imitation. This is the statement of Brahma, and because we belong to Brahma's disciplic succession, we should accept his statement that the real Kapila is the son of Devahuti, and the real Sankhya philosophy is the system of philosophy which he introduced, and which will be accepted by the acharyas, the directors of the spiritual discipline. The word susamata means accepted by persons who are counted upon to give their good opinion.